Okay, so last video we talked about where we kind of came from, what Father has brought us through. So now we're going to share with you guys where we're going. All right, so our next step in this process and our journey is to actually plant a Missional Community Church here in Ferguson. And we're actually going to be doing that through the SOMA network of churches, which is a network of churches that actually helps pastors plant Missional Community Churches. So if you want to do more research on this, you can look up SOMA. You can find out what it is that they're doing, and I really highly encourage you to do that if this video does kind of tug on your heart. So what a Missional Community Church is a church made up of missional communities, right? And you're like, okay, so what is a missional community? Well, a missional community, if you're looking at it from like an aerial view way up here, missional communities looks a lot like small groups, okay? Because it's small pockets of people that are meeting on a regular basis. However, in a small group, typically what happens is you're working on a curriculum or something like that, a Bible study. You're looking at the sermon of the last Sunday's sermon, but with missional communities, these small pockets of people, of believers, are instead of doing those things, what they're doing is they are intentionally living their lives and developing rhythms of their lives so that they can live their life in front of unbelievers and expose Jesus to them in their word, in their deeds, and they're actually pursuing a specific people group. A successful missional community will have names of people, specific names of people in a specific group that they are actually praying for and that they are pursuing for Jesus. And they're doing it without an agenda, okay? They're not trying to get them, it's not inviting them to come to their missional community gathering. It's not inviting them to come to their Sunday worship gathering, because all these missional communities are getting together on Sunday and worshiping together. It's not inviting them to that. It's just living their life in front of them, and that's it. And loving them, that's it, with no agenda. And this no agenda love gets an unbeliever's attention. Maybe doesn't convert them, although it does provide many opportunities for that, but it at least gets their attention and helps them see that Christianity isn't about a gathering on Sunday morning, and it isn't about living a moral life. It's about loving. It at least helps them understand that. So that's what a missional community church is.
And that's exactly what drew us to the missiology, or the way of doing church, of missional communities, because the Bible says that they, meaning an unbelieving world, will know that we are Christians by our love. And that passage means two things. One, our love within the church, within the bride of Christ, has to be so strong, so powerful, so intimate. Our relationships have to be so transparent and forthright that a non-believer will look at our relationships and see something supernatural about it. Or if they can't identify that it's supernatural, just at least that it's weird, because they can't tell whose kid is whose or who is family, because we're all just being that open and loving with each other. Secondly, that means that we have to be living our lives within the church with one another, in front of those who aren't a part of the church, right? So a lot of times we can get caught in a Christian bubble, and all of our friends are also believers. All of our friends are not only Christians, but Christians in our denomination or in our brotherhood or in our church. And then it provides no opportunity for us to be that light, where people can see our good works and glorify our Father in heaven. It doesn't provide any opportunity for people to see Jesus living in and through us. So whether or not someone who doesn't know Jesus is able to identify, what they're really witnessing is the gospel, just the gospel played out in front of them, because the gospel unifies us, and the gospel saves us, the gospel redeems us, the gospel carries us through our day, the gospel matures us. The gospel is what we hold tight to, hold firm to, for hope for the future. We trust the gospel is going to be what carries us home, right? And so they're seeing the gospel impact our community, our Christian community. They're seeing the gospel impact us as individuals, and they're seeing the gospel impact how we treat everyone, how we treat them. So that only happens when we are gospel fluent. gospel literacy or Bible literacy is knowing the Bible, knowing the gospel, being able to regurgitate the facts and the figures and the books of the Bible. But there's people who go through Bible college, through seminary, and they wind up atheists. It's not what we know, it's who we know, right? So gospel fluency is not only knowing the gospel in our minds, but being able to see the gospel in all of life. Similarly to speaking a foreign language like Spanish, you can take classes on Spanish, like we take classes on the Bible. You can study Spanish, you can study the Spanish culture. Like some of us study Christian culture as we're growing up. We know the songs, we know the Christianese, right? But do we personally know Jesus? Do we have a personal encounter with the gospel? Can we see the gospel and speak the gospel into our lives and into the lives of those around us? So naturally, someone who is gospel fluent is living their life on mission. They're viewing themselves as a missionary to the world, and they are always looking for an opportunity to be loving others and serving others, because God impacts us with the gospel, not by beating it over our heads, but by beckoning us and by serving us and by loving us and speaking gently to us. And so when we are impacted by the gospel and we're carrying the gospel with us and we're seeing it in all of life, then we naturally are living on mission. And then living in a gospel-centered community, well then naturally that community is going to be living on mission together. So that's really exciting to us, because especially in our generation and the generations that are coming up, a lot of people are falling away from the church, and our society and our culture is sometimes rightly cynical of the church. And so it was very appealing to us, and it really drew us. We see it so clearly in Scripture, and we see how God pursued us so gently and with so much love and compassion. The idea of speaking the gospel to one another, living in a Christian community that is loving and transparent, and reaching out to others, loving others very intentionally and without an agenda. All those things just really moved our hearts, and we felt very passionate about cultivating a church or a congregation where that was the culture.
So whenever an individual who is gospel fluent, who's seeing the gospel everywhere and experiencing the gospel everywhere, is intentionally living their life on mission with a group of other people who are all gospel fluent and also intentionally living their life on mission, then what you have at that point is a missional community. And so that is what a missional community is, and that is why we are being drawn to that. However, one thing that I'd like to add, especially as it relates to our channel, Anchor and Abide, is that whenever I was going through a document put out by a church called Austin Stone, which is a church in Texas, maybe you heard of it. They actually transitioned their entire church, and they're a mega church. They transitioned their entire church to a missional community church, which was a huge endeavor. And so they put out this document that I was reading about how to make that transition, and I'm reading it, and they had one line in there, and I'm not going to quote it word for word because I don't remember it word for word, but it basically said that whenever we focused on being a community, whenever we focused on building a community, we dropped the ball on being on mission. But whenever we really focused on being on mission, then we realized that the community part just happened. And we see that really in our world. We see that like a band of soldiers, whenever they go into war together, they are on mission, like they have a common mission, and that common mission builds a band between them, a union with them that's really inseparable. And we see that in a workplace. Whenever a team of people get really focused on a mission, really get focused on a project, then the community just happens, right? So there is an element of that we can't understand and that we can't comprehend, but I believe that there's actually a level of it that's even greater than that. One passage that I keep coming to over and over and over again in this process that has actually become one of my favorite passages in Scripture is John 17. And that's where Jesus is praying before he's executed. He prays for himself, he prays for his disciples, those people that are on the earth currently with him. But then he says, I pray not only for these, being those disciples, but I pray also for those who will come to believe in me through them. So that's me, that's Crystal, if you love Jesus, and that's you. So he said that he prays for us. He says, I pray that they would become one with one another as you and I are one. And he's talking to Father. So he asks in his prayer he prays that we become one, that the church become one, just as the Trinity is one. Okay? But then he doesn't stop there. He says, and I pray that they become one with us, right? So I pray that they become one as we are one, and I pray that we all become one. This is Jesus's prayer, okay? It's in John 17. Go look at it because it's mind-blowing. What I realized is that Jesus is actually praying for community. Jesus is praying for the community of the church. He's praying for the community development of the church. And I realize that what he's praying for, I can't understand, right? I don't understand the Trinity. Nobody understands the Trinity. Nobody can actually properly explain what the Trinity is and how the Trinity works. Nobody really, it's unfathomable to our brains, right? And so what Jesus prays is that we become one as the Trinity is one. Well, I can't explain that, much less actually accomplish it. And I certainly can't make that community one with the Trinity, okay? I can't do it, okay? If I can't explain it, I certainly can't do it. So I realized that the connection with spiritual formation, what we realized in spiritual formation that really changed our life is that spiritual formation acknowledges that we're incapable of doing and being what we want to do and who we want to be. We're incapable of accomplishing that. But it's something that Jesus accomplishes in us. Specifically, it's something that the Spirit accomplishes in us as we submit to Jesus, as we submit to Yahweh, right? So whenever we do what Jesus says, he accomplishes a work in us. He accomplishes in us what we've been trying to do. So I tried to stop lusting. I tried to stop being angry. I tried to stop being prideful. I tried to stop doing all these things. And whenever I was trying to be that person, I just kept failing over and over and over again. But whenever I started to just love Jesus and pursue Jesus and abide in him and follow his commands, what I realized is that he started doing that in me. Right? I stopped struggling with lust and anger whenever I stopped trying to stop being lustful and angry. I stopped struggling with lust and anger whenever I just started pursuing Jesus. And he did that work in me. So really what Missional Communities is a community of believers acknowledging that exact same thing. We can't build what we want to build. We can't build a community where the onlooking world knows that we're Christians by how we love one another. We can't build a place so strong with love and so strong with oneness that an outside unbelievers look at it and say that's oneness. That's love that I can't understand. We're not capable of doing that, but Jesus is, and he prayed for it. The Spirit is capable of doing that. So what we need to do is we just need to focus on doing what Jesus told us to do. Well, what did he tell us to do? Go and make disciples. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to go and make disciples. We're going to live our lives in front of unbelievers in a way that they can see Jesus. And that's what Missional Communities is. So another connection to spiritual formation, this is just because it's important to our channel and we like talking about spiritual formation, is that really Missional Communities highlights two spiritual disciplines that have kind of become lost in the church. And that would be hospitality, where you are just opening the doors of your home, not just for believers, but for unbelievers, where you're realizing that your home isn't yours, and that it's God's home, and you're inviting people into it. And then that spirit of hospitality extends to your life, where you're opening your heart, right? Not just the doors of your home, but you're opening your heart to people around you. You're able to share things that are so vulnerable because you have that strength and that confidence in the Spirit. You're able to share things that are so vulnerable with believers and unbelievers. You're able to open up and share your testimony at the drop of a hat. You're able to do that. That is that spiritual discipline and that spirit of hospitality. But another spiritual discipline that it really accentuates is also the spiritual discipline of celebration. Right, because successful missional communities throw better parties than any other house on the block, including unbelievers' houses, right? Because we are so excited about what Jesus is doing, and we realize that life is to be enjoyed in community with one another, right? So whenever you start feeling a connection with people around you that you love, not just believers, but also unbelievers, you want to celebrate with them. You want to hang out with them more often. You want to do fun things. You're actually motivated to have a block party just because. Not because you're promoting something, not because you're trying to invite people somewhere, not you're just doing it just because you want to have some fun, right? So those are two spiritual disciplines that are really brought to the surface. Of course, there's silence, solitude, all that. I mean, that all benefits a missional community as well. But those are two that kind of rise to the surface, is like, oh wow, these are things that really that we as a church in America the American church, we've really kind of been missing this. And it kind of accentuates that and brings it to the surface, which we're really excited about engaging in. So our next step, we'll have another video where we talk about examples of missional communities and where we talk about examples of being gospel fluent. But I want to share with you guys our next step, something you could be praying for. And we're going to ask you to pray, and we're going to ask you also, if you're willing to and if you're able to, pray and see if the Spirit leads you to financially support us as well, which makes us super uncomfortable to do. I've had to do it over and over again. One thing that's really encouraged me in that is that a man actually sat down with me and he said, well, if you're not bold enough to ask for money and to ask for God's money to do God's work, then how do I know that you're bold enough to actually do God's work? And I was like, ouch, okay. So I get it, right? So I'm asking if you would pray and see if the Spirit would lead you to financially give to our mission here. And right now we don't have a website, so you can email me. I'll put that on the screen right now. You can email me and say, hey, I'm interested in doing that. Can you help me proceed with that? And I'll of course, I'll happily do that. But our next step is to actually plant this missional community church. We've got a group of about 15 to 20 people who say they want to do this with us. And so we're going to do it. But we don't really know how to do it, right? We don't know what we're doing. So we actually are partnering with a Soma church, a missional community Soma church in Arnold called City on a Hill, that is going to take us under the wing, and they're going to really teach us what it is to be a missional community church. And that's going to be a 2-year training process where we're going to be learning straight from there. We're going to be doing ministry there, and so we're going to be learning here, and then we're going to be taking the lessons to Ferguson, to where we are right now. We're going to be dropping them here and developing this missional community here. So we've got a huge task in front of us. We really feel as though the hand of God is upon us, though, and we feel like He is most certainly encouraging and supporting us in doing this. So that's what we're doing. That's what we're up to. So hospitality is one that comes to the surface. And what's really cool is that our church plant that we're planting is actually called Xenia Church, which is the Greek word. Xenia is a Greek word for hospitality. So we're pretty excited about that, about this idea of hospitality, and we really like the name. It's pretty cool, and it's with an X, not a Z. Okay, so we're not going with the continued baby names. Okay, it's an X, not a Z, but phonetically it is Xenia. So we really want to encourage you to pray for us, most certainly. If you have any questions, then you can also send an email to where I put down there. Up here it is again. You can send an email and just ask your questions. You can go look up Soma, but we just wanted to share what it is that we've been feeling led to do. Ask for you to pray. If this content is something that you would like to continue to follow, we're going to continue talking about spiritual formation. We're going to continue talking about missional communities. So if you'd like to track along with that, of course, you can subscribe to our channel. Make sure you ring the bell so you continue to get the notifications. And again, as always, we just want to encourage you to continue to seek what it means to anchor yourself in Jesus and to abide in Him. What you said was really good.
Thanks, honey.